Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spare a Thought, the podcast that shines a light on the people, ideas, issues, and organisations that are often overlooked or misrepresented in the media. My name is Tom Spare, your host. I want you to cast your memories back to over half a decade ago to the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Countries across the world were going into lockdown as the virus, originating from China, spread across the globe. So many aspects of our lives were altered by the pandemic. Our freedoms curtailed, our ability to see family, friends and colleagues. Our work lives, our health, our environment, finances and indeed our futures were irrevocably changed. Now, the pandemic is not officially over. There's lots of people who have been left behind. You can find previous episodes I've made on living with long COVID and supporting those living with long COVID to hear the impact of society seemingly moving on and leaving lots of vulnerable people in its wake. In today's episode, I want to focus on another group whose lives were impacted by the lockdowns and whose stories have fallen by the wayside. Generation COVID, the generation of students and young people whose educations and futures were put on hold by the lockdowns and whose subsequent experiences in education, in work and wider society have been hugely damaged by COVID-19. You're going to hear from Will, Izzy, Emily, Eden and Emma, who recount their experiences of when the lockdowns came and what happened next. So let's get into it and spare a thought for Generation COVID. Recently, I sat down with Will and Izzy, classmates of mine, whilst I was studying for my MA in Political Communication at Cardiff University between 2023 and 2024. As you'll hear, Will was finishing off his A-levels when the pandemic hit, and Izzy was halfway through her first year at university in York. This is what they have to say.
Yeah, so I was 17, about to turn 18 in the January. I was studying towards my final A-level exams and then looking to go to university. I was heavily involved in playing rugby, just starting that weird phase of like migrating from going out with friends, just out and about, to then kind of more like going to the pub, going like out into like Cardiff, all that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, March 2020, the pandemic hit.
And Izzy, how about you?
Yeah, so I was in my first year of university. I remember kind of just like living normal, fresher lifestyles, just going out all the time basically and joining like a couple of different sports and things like that. And kind of the first couple of months of your first year kind of feel a bit surreal and you feel you're kind of settling in. And then I remember in kind of the start of 2020, you start focusing a bit more on like uni work and you're feeling a bit more serious about it. And then also there was all these kind of rumours about this like virus, flu thing. There's been a few cases here and there. And yeah, I can remember kind of like not hysteria, but like there was a bit of a commotion starting about it. And it was kind of two sides of like some people were like, this is going to be really serious and we need to prepare for it. And then some people being like, it's sensationalized, it's going to pass, like it'll be fine. And just kind of being caught in the middle of those two things.
Next, we have Eden, who's based in Northern Ireland. Here she is talking about her experiences as a 16-year-old studying for her GCSEs.
And I was really looking forward to getting the exams done that I worked so hard for 2 years, and then going on to A-levels. I was also really looking forward to having more independence with being nearly 17 and learning how to drive, opportunities to socialise with my friends. And I was also looking forward to trying some new subjects for A-level and being able to get work experience and placements to help kind of further explore my career path and give me a bit more clarity. Was training a lot in taekwondo, so I was training maybe 3 to 4 times a week, going away most weekends. I had quite a busy social life, and yeah, I was just really enjoying being an average 16-year-old, getting that balance between school and staying in social life and being involved in the sport, which was really important to me.
Emma, like Will, was undertaking her A-levels when COVID arrived on our shores. Here's Emma talking about her experience.
When school first closed in March 2020, I was a bit thrown, as we all were. It felt unreal. I'd been preparing for my A-levels for so long, mocks and everything. So it felt just complete surprise, completely took me by surprise. And I think I'd grown so accustomed to revising and preparing for those exams. So when those exams were no longer in the picture, it almost gave me a reflection of actually what time do I have and how am I going to make the most of this? I was in a unique situation at the time because my exams were cancelled. So for various teachers, it entails sort of building on the work that I'd done, sending in some sample essays. And my teachers did email to check how we were, but I think everyone was really struggling themselves. So it was tricky to kind of support everyone and actually know what was going on. I think the school didn't really know what was going on. No one really knew what was going on. So it was hard for them to kind of navigate that situation. I was aiming to go to university. I had a place, University of Birmingham, to study business with French. The pandemic didn't change those plans. I wish that I'd taken a year out just to allow myself that time to grow and develop as a person and then avoid the challenges of COVID with like isolation and no lectures. But I did pursue university and I did head off to university in September 2020 to start my bachelor's degree.
And finally, is Emily from Barry in South Wales. Here she's talking about her plans for what she would do after her A-levels.
So my plan was to finish my A-levels, do really well, and go to the University of Bristol and study like a BA in history and Spanish. And then I was hoping, like the plan as 17-year-old Emily was to go on and do a master's in history and then a PhD and eventually become a really fancy lecturer at university.
When did you start to notice that things might get bad?
Yeah, so I remember it must have been a few days before we actually went into lockdown and there was all these rumours about we won't be sitting our exams and schools are going to be shut. And obviously when all you know is going to school 5 days a week, you think they're never going to shut schools. They'd never shut them before. They're not going to do it now for something. And at that point, I don't think people realised how serious it was. And then I remember I was actually in history and our head of year came in and literally just said, like, tomorrow will be your final day. All exams are cancelled, and that was it then. And then we had all that, like when, you start sewing the shirts and all that kind of thing as end of school, and it just felt like surreal. Obviously, I think we were all buzzing because we didn't have exams, but then we were thinking of short term, not the long term of how are we going to get into uni, how are we going to like get jobs, are we going to get our grades and all this kind of stuff. Boris had that announcement, and then I think everything just changed. We weren't going to be able to do everything to social distancing, masks in shops. You weren't only one person could go out and get like groceries, and you only had out once a day for exercise. And I think it was a massive thing, especially as a freshly 18-year-old, to be able to have all the freedom, or newfound freedom of being 18, to all of a sudden having literally nothing.
Did you say you were able to do this shirt signing thing?
Yeah. Luckily, it was literally, I think that happened, must have been on the Thursday, and then we must have got into lockdown then on like the Monday or Tuesday of the week after.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. When was the sort of do you remember the next time you were actually able to see your classmates again?
No, to be honest, there's probably people that I haven't seen since that Thursday or whenever it was. And I think it was only when stuff started getting better a few months down the line that I saw everyone. Obviously, we had those, I don't know if you remember the Zoom like quiz nights and all that kind of stuff, and like Xbox and all that. But in terms of actually face to face seeing someone, no, I can't actually remember exactly when that was.
So I was in year 13, I was doing my A-levels, and I think around February sort of time, I hadn't heard of it before. And then my friends were saying, oh, have you seen the news? Have you heard about what's coming from China at that point? I was like, oh, no, I haven't heard about that. What's that? That's crazy. So we were like chatting, gossiping, and I was thinking, I was like, okay, well, at the minute it's contained to one country. Like at this point, I didn't know that I had moved or anything. So I was thinking, oh, this is going to be fine. And then I remember at the start of March, I was like in my usual Spanish classes, and my Spanish oral teacher was saying, we need to get as many speaking practices done as possible. So I have so much like sort of evidence, and I have so many notes on your speaking abilities just in case. And I was thinking, just in case of what? Like, why do you need to suddenly collect all of this like material? So we were doing like a practice speaking mock every week. Every lesson I had with her, we were doing another practice speaking mock. But I was thinking like that is very strange. And then we were talking about the Easter break. And this one particular teacher was saying, I don't think you'll be coming back after the break. And I was thinking, oh, that's a bit scary. But all of my other teachers were saying, no, it's fine. 2 weeks off over Easter, maybe an extra 2 weeks and you'll be coming back. But this one teacher was so adamant that this was going to become really serious. It started making me think, oh, this is going to become quite bad, I fear.
And then for you, Izzy, because obviously it's slightly different. You were at uni. How did it impact you, and how did you feel at the time when those announcements were made?
I went home like a week earlier than everyone else for the Easter holidays. So the Easter holidays normally start like kind of a week into March. And I went home right at the beginning of March because I had a weekend away with my friends booked. And it's interesting you say that, Will, about it being on like the lockdown introduced on the Monday, because I went home and then went away Friday to Sunday with my friends. And there was about 10 of us and we were just staying in like an Airbnb in West Wales. And on the Saturday and Sunday, like there were girls whose mums were texting them, ringing them, saying like, you need to come home. Like they're going to put, like, it's dangerous. Like you need to come home. But for some reason, I didn't really think it was going to be that big of a deal. And when I went home, I was going home for like 4 weeks and then I was expecting to go back to uni, obviously. So I only took like 4 weeks worth of stuff. I didn't pack up my whole room. So I didn't have much stuff at all with me really, and it was just like what I could take home on the train, so I had actually barely anything. And I remember like I just bought like a lemon plant that had cost me like £25, and I said to my flatmates, oh, will one of you water it for a bit while I'm away and then it should be fine for like a week or two. Obviously it wasn't fine. By the time I actually went to empty my uni room, it was absolutely dead, like withered lemons on it. That's probably the thing I was most annoyed about. But yeah, I just remember kind of like all of a sudden within like a week, it was like the start of that week, I was like, oh, like I'm home, it's nice to be home, I'm seeing my friends this weekend, excited, packing, going away. And then all of a sudden it just being like, this is really serious, like this is really serious. And then yeah, the Monday, I think we all went home on the Sunday and the Monday was like, that's it then. So I remember it being a bit like all like kind of like cascaded all of a sudden, like it was lockdown.
So obviously for you, Will, like school just stopped, right? So
Yeah.
How did you fill your time? What were you doing like in that?
To be honest, it was just one of those things. I think you wake up the next day and you're so used to like waking up at 7 o'clock, getting ready for school and all that, to be honest, I think probably what most people, well, especially boys my age did, we played Xbox all day, was probably it was the only thing to do really, was play Xbox, watch films. Obviously you could go on runs and all that kind of stuff, and there was all those there was a big push for home workouts, wasn't there? So I remember I bought one of those like weighted like bungee cord strings, and we used to just do that in my room just for some fitness, to be honest. And other than that, there really wasn't a lot going on. And I think it was probably quite hard for people, especially who were in my age group of 17, 18-ish, because everyone said since you were like young, once you were 18, like the world George Day, you're going to do all these good things. And I think there was probably quite a feeling of like, this is unfair, especially I think with the stuff that came out about it was only vulnerable people like were in serious risk. So I think if you were fit and healthy, you weren't at such risk. And I think there was a lot of resentment from my age group of that decision to lock us all away, because the chances of us actually like dying were quite slim. So I think there was probably quite a lot of like frustration with the government around that kind of thing, which isn't necessarily right, but it's probably at the time you don't know any better, so you just think, why am I being locked up?
So when school closed, how did you first react? Did it feel temporary or was it more serious straight away? Did you feel?
I think it felt just very, very strange, because I remember the Friday. So a lot of my friends that week of like I'm not sure when it would have started, sort of like the 15th, 16th of March, that final week I had in school. And my teachers were saying, okay, school will be stopping on Friday. You'll be going home for Easter. We might see you afterwards. There was no like definitive, this is it. So I think a lot of my friends didn't bother coming to school on the Friday. They sort of stopped on the Wednesday. And I was thinking, okay, that's fine. I'll see them after Easter. And then on that Friday morning, my teachers were all saying, oh, when you've gone home, when it's been a couple of weeks, you can add us on Facebook if you want to keep in touch. And I was thinking, oh, that's strange, because they wouldn't usually do that until sort of like July, August, when we'd officially left. I remember I took loads of selfies with Snapchat filters with all of my friends on that final Friday. And I didn't really feel like I would never see them again. A lot of them I never saw again, but I didn't feel like that. So it didn't really feel serious until I got home and sat down and saw like Spain and Italy go into sort of these military lockdowns, see Boris Johnson. And at this point, I didn't really have much knowledge of politics, very different to now. So I was thinking, oh, this is quite serious. My parents are watching this happening. So yeah, it didn't feel like serious until I got home. And then I saw all of the news and actually paid attention to what was happening.
And so did school just stop then? Or did the teaching carry on? What happened?
So I'm not sure how it worked for other schools, but because at that point we had mostly finished all of the content, it was just exam revision or just finishing off coursework. My school, or for my year group, didn't provide any additional like online learning or anything. We sort of just did a hard stop. So because my like history coursework had finished, I'd finished my Spanish speaking. Well, it was the week before my Spanish speaking exam. So there was nothing else left to do for that. It was just exam prep. We just, hard stopped, and there was no like online classes. So I never experienced like online sixth form or anything.
Blimey, okay. So that was a real, hard stop. How did you sort of stay in touch with your friends in that time? And what sort of contact did you have with them? What methods were you using?
So we were big into Facebook Messenger, and those were the big ones. And I had this little group chat with some of my friends, and every like morning at 11 a.m. we would do like a workout together, like a little video chat workout, watching a YouTube video, which is like quite fond memory. But it's definitely reflective of that sort of like iced coffee, whipped coffee, like Chloe Ting workouts. Yeah, so we sort of used a video chat. I did some 24-hour readathons because my friend at the time had a YouTube channel and he wanted to make like a 24-hour readathon video. So yeah, we kind of kept it fun, but it was mostly just like video chats or texting. I didn't see any of them.
Did that energy and positivity, that frequency, how long did that sort of carry on for?
So the sort of like video chats, I think that sort of carried on until like August, September. I remember having a pretty constant stream of communication with the certain people that I was close with until I went to university, pretty much. I'm not sure how positive it was, because I think after a couple of months you become sort of drained of doing your 11 a.m. workouts and constantly speaking about the same things when nobody's doing anything different.
And how about you, Izzy? So you went back home with you were separated from your lemon plant, and you only had, not much with you. What were the next couple of months like for you during the lockdowns?
To be honest, I think I'm quite privileged because those next couple of months ended up being some really nice times with my family. And I think I will kind of like, in a very weird way, look back on those memories as like quite a nice time, because it was like probably the only time in my whole life where me and my mum, my dad and my sister and my aunt, the five of us that lived in our house, none of us had work. Like my dad works in a nickel factory. He was just sent home. They had like bare bones staff. And my sister worked for an insurance company and she got sent home, and because there's so much like data protection that needs to go on with the work they do, it took like probably a month or two for them to send everyone out laptops that was encrypted and all of that kind of stuff. So, and to like get them set up on systems they could use from home. I remember like the first kind of month or two, it was literally just that we had that glorious weather, just chilling in the garden. And it was quite nice. But then I think after like probably like 4 or 5 weeks, the boredom really set in, like really, really just kind of silly things like just going to the beach and going in the sea and stuff like that. Like, because things were so heavily policed as well, and you were worried about like that there was a lot of like ambiguity about what forms of exercise were acceptable and how it was policed and things like that. Also, my great aunt that lived with us, she was vulnerable on quite a lot of fronts. She's still with us as well. So she has dementia, diabetes, and she has a learning disability as well. And the learning disability she has means that her heart doesn't pump blood properly. So she was very vulnerable. She was like, I think she's had 6 COVID jabs, and she was always in that first group that they were like getting in for the jabs. So even when things were opening back up and you were kind of allowed to like go and sit outside and things like that, my parents were always super cautious. Yeah, I think the boredom was a big thing for me because even when we were allowed to go outside again, it was kind of different for me. I had to be still super careful, especially the year before the first vaccine came out.
I remember on the TV that there was people being quarantined in the hotel, and it was just really weird how fast this kind of escalated. Exams were cancelled pretty much straight away as well, which was really helpful. It was really actually quite good for me because it meant that I was able to prioritise my training. I really quite enjoyed the first lockdown. I think it gave me the opportunity to kind of slow down. I was able to train with Olympians. I remember also I was able to train with somebody who lived in Korea. I put a lot more effort into my black belt, and I then was able to do it in September, even despite all the different restrictions. It also gave me the opportunity to become closer with my friends. It's quite interesting how, even though we were all stuck at home, how we were able to kind of still like maintain those relationships. And I have some really good memories with a lot of my friends. It also really gave me the opportunity to connect with friends I hadn't seen in a while because we'd all slowed down, we'd all stopped revising and kind of had that opportunity to kind of build those relationships.
But both your parents, both your parents work through the pandemic?
Yeah, that was, I think, was especially hard on my mum because I get a little bit confused about where the restrictions differentiate between England and Wales, because at that point I just felt like I wasn't paying attention to what any of the restrictions were, because for my mum's sake and my dad's sake, I think he was delivering post at this point, which is also quite nerve-wracking, constantly going to people's houses. But at that point we were just so stay inside, my brother and I. Like, we didn't, even when restrictions sort of lifted, we didn't go out. I think it was really, really important for us to keep my mum safe so that she could keep the elderly people she looked after safe, and so that those other families were safe. I know they petitioned the local council to stop people who had active COVID being sent back to the care home because they have a reablement unit in my mum's care home. So people could come back to be looked after even if they had active COVID. And they petitioned the council, and the council purchased PPE for them rather than that coming from the government. So they did a lot of work to make sure that they were as safe as possible. But I think that was like terrifying. My mum coming home every day. She was doing PCR tests every Friday. She was doing two lateral flow tests a week. And then by default, we would also do them every so often at home just to make sure that everyone was being safe.
So how did it work with your results?
Ended school in March. We weren't sure what the setup was with like grading, whether we were going to sit online exams or anything. In fairness, I actually, for history, because it was a coursework, you had like 2 exams at the end of A-levels, and then you had your coursework. But I was still doing my coursework in lockdown, which was just to finish it, because that coursework was going to be our exam in place. So that was something I was still cracking on with. But in terms of all my other subjects, I can't remember how we found this out, but we knew it was going to be predicted grades. And obviously in Wales, differently to England, you do your AS levels, which England don't do. So you have an exam in year 12. So all of our grades were heavily based off of that. And I didn't do badly in that, but I didn't do as well as I probably could have in my AS levels. But I remember I was one of the lucky ones because there were people who I were mates with didn't do great in their AS levels, and that impacted them where they went to uni because of their predicted grades. Let's say they could have got 2 A's and a B, they ended up getting about B's and C's and stuff. Uni actually wasn't necessarily my first option, so I was on this Network 75 apprenticeship scheme to kind of do what I'm doing now, strangely enough. I went through the interview process, got lined up with a few companies and all this, and then I found out literally the day I moved into my uni halls that they were going to accept me. And it was quite lucky that I didn't go on that, because all the people who got accepted on that apprenticeship scheme got made redundant through like COVID.
Okay.
So yeah, so it was lucky that I actually made the right decision. But in terms of finding out that we were getting predicted grades, I can't really recall that. As soon as the results came out, there were lots of people that did considerably worse than they probably would have if they sat exams, which wasn't. I don't know how they mediate it, but it definitely didn't feel fair at the time.
In 2020, with exams cancelled due to the pandemic, A-level grades were determined by an algorithm that factored in students' past performance. Exams were cancelled because of social distancing restrictions. This led to thousands of students being downgraded from their teachers' predicted grades, a move that sparked protests across the UK and ultimately forced a government U-turn, with original teacher-assessed grades being reinstated. The scale of the problem was immense. Initial figures showed that in England alone, almost 40% of teacher-predicted grades were downgraded, equating to 300,000 A-levels. Students in England were not able to appeal this downgrading initially, and for many, this meant losing a university place that they'd worked for years. The system is also widely criticised for being socially biased, with data showing that students from more deprived areas and larger state schools were disproportionately penalised compared to their counterparts at independent private schools.
So it was a bit of a nightmare, to be honest with you.
Why did you pick uni over the apprenticeship thing?
To be honest, they didn't tell me soon enough. So it was getting towards obviously I was still doing my student finance, choosing my accommodation, because you could always drop out until until you moved in. And then I didn't hear anything back from them. So I just thought, I didn't get it. I'll just go to uni. I'm still really happy to go to uni. And then the day I moved into my accommodation, literally put the bags on the bed kind of thing, I got an email from them saying, you've been accepted and all this. And I was just like, guys, it's too late now.
Yeah.
Luckily, I definitely made the right decision, because I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't chosen uni.
It's interesting what you said about the AS's Will, because I remember thinking at the time, if I'd have been in your year, I'd have done awfully. I had BCC in my ASs. Well, I actually had BCCD and dropped, obviously, the one I got a D in. I ended up sitting 3 of my AS exams alongside my A-level exams in order to kind of get my grades up. So I had the option of resitting first year, and I said, can I retake some? And they only let me retake 3. They wouldn't let me retake all 6. I ended up sitting 9 exams in my A-level exams, so I ended up sitting 6 A-levels and 3 ASs, different exams, and I managed to get my grades up to ABB. That was, and obviously then got accepted to York, met my grades for York and stuff like that, so was really, really chuffed with that. If I hadn't been able to resit those exams, I wouldn't have got into any Russell group, probably with BCC.
Across the board, I just remember there was absolute uproar over people's exam results, and weirdly enough, it seemed to be private school-wise, they all seemed to be getting the grades that they were predicted, and then it was the other schools that seemed to be getting the worst end of the stick, which was, I'm pretty sure we covered that in either second or third year in uni, but it was pretty obvious that if you went to a certain school, you did better on the predicted grade front than if you went to a bog standard state school, which was quite an interesting read.
Yeah, well, there was there was an algorithm they tried to put together, wasn't it? There was also Gavin Williamson and I should say Sir Gavin Williamson. What sort of communication were you getting from the university then about starting? Because obviously a lot of people didn't know what the academic year was going to look like.
From what I remember, I don't think anything was any different. I got an email the week after results saying apply for accommodation. I applied for accommodation. I got first or second choice accommodation. Yeah, and up until they sort of sent the things for moving in, everything was normal. It wasn't until they sent how the move-in process would work. So you could only have one parent move in with you at a time. So both my parents were there, but they had to take it in turns to come with me to my flat in my halls. But yeah, up until that point, everything, the communication just seemed normal. It didn't seem like anything had particularly changed in the pandemic.
And so what was like moving to the university like? And what was Freshers Week like?
The moving was really strange because yeah, so you could only have one person come in at a time, which I didn't quite understand because my parents had come from the same place, coming with me into a hall of new people. We're going back in the same car together, but for some reason only one of them could walk up the stairs at a time. I don't fully understand that. So I think my parents found that really upsetting, that they weren't allowed to be together to look at my new room together. So my mum carried the bedding up the stairs and she made my bed. And then my dad carried other stuff in and was just stood there like, don't know what to do now. Yeah, and I met my flatmates. I have a really funny memory of like, I was holding loads of stuff and one of my flatmates went to shake my hand and I was like, I can't, I'm holding loads of stuff and you can see that. So it was like awkward moments when you're meeting people for the first time. Yeah, and I think there was restrictions saying you should only socialise in your flat. I'm not going to lie and say that people stuck to that. Generally, in the halls of residence that I was in, they did not. So Freshers Week was not what I expected. There was like no clubbing. I think you could go to a bar in a table of 6. So we did that with the flat next door. So we went to the crowd, the busiest, the most crowded Spoons I've ever been in. 3 floors in Bristol and on the harbour side. And it was packed. It was manic. But it was okay because we were sat in our little table of 6 in this manic. But obviously there's no table of 6 when you're in the toilets. Everyone's in the toilets. So yeah, we did that experience, and then I went to another bar at a table of 6, which is really fun. And that was it. So but I think there was Freshers Week, flat to flat. I think there was so much rule breaking. There was a thing, you shouldn't host parties, you shouldn't mix with flats. Students don't care about that. Students are living in their own world. Like I remember my flatmate and I taking photos in our like individual rooms to prove that we weren't involved in any of these like parties. Because that's the only way you had proof. Like I was in my flat, yes, but I was in my own room on my own. I remember I've got so many funny selfies with like Snapchat captions. That's like proof I'm in your room.
Evidence. Were there fines? Did the police ever get involved at all?
Yeah, I think the police got involved in the flat that I was living in. I was at home at this point, but yeah, the police got involved in loads of different flats because yeah, there would be like massive parties in different halls of residence, like campus security. I remember used to like drive around loops of all the accommodations, so they would come investigate if there was loud noise, loud music. Yeah, it almost felt like there was no pandemic, like internally in university halls.
Living in university halls was a really tricky experience because obviously university accommodation isn't designed to be stayed in the whole time, to do lectures there, to study there. And obviously where I was quite cosy, it was quite small. So it didn't really allow flat meetings or anything, or flat gatherings or whatever. It was definitely different from what I imagine it was from videos I'd seen online, watching YouTubers at university. I imagine university to be a much more social experience, a much more academically enriching experience, but I felt it was just reduced to the content on my laptop and just seeing buildings, but never really going inside them. Making friends was, as one would expect, a really challenging and tricky experience. As I previously mentioned, there just wasn't the structures to make friends. There just wasn't the same ways you make friends, like going to a society or meeting other people at lectures. So I constantly felt like I was playing catch up, trying to find like-minded people. And it was really, really quite isolating because you could go for walks with friends, but you obviously wouldn't meet them. You wouldn't have the traditional frameworks to meet friends or get to know people. So I found it really quite isolating and really quite tricky to kind of get to know people and feel like I belonged on campus.
Were you in residences, Will, or
Yeah, I was in Calibon North. Yeah.
Talabot North? Okay, shout out to Talabot North. What was that life like in Talabot North in times of lockdowns?
Yeah, so to be honest, I'll never forget going there. I didn't look at the rooms or anything. I literally looked online and saw that the Taliban accommodations was where you wanted to be as a first year. So I was like, Tally North, Tally South, Tally Court, all of them, 1, 2, 3 on my list. Like that was it. And then I remember turning up with my mum and dad. I'm going into the room, and it was literally like a prison cell. Like it was literally like a spitting image of like what you see on TV kind of thing, with the little blue mattress bed and all that kind of stuff. And I was just thinking, I've got a year of this. I was like, yeah, it's fine. I'm here now. I'll deal with it. Obviously, and being so close to Cardiff, I knew a few boys I went to school with were all staying in the Taliban accommodation. So personally, I just messaged them and went out with them and did their thing. But there was police patrolling consistently. You had, I remember they were fining people 10 grand if you were having a flat party. And there was police and security running into the flats consistently. And then I remember people were posting when because obviously COVID spread around there like wildfire. And I remember there was people posting like post-it notes on the windows. You could only go to the shop and come straight back. And then I remember it got to the crunch point of when they put police and security, they Harris fenced in between all the different accommodations.
Oh, yeah.
And then they put security, so you couldn't go. So if I stayed in Talabot North, I couldn't walk through the underpass to Talabot South because I'd have to show my driving license or a form of ID, my room key, and my name as like the flat and all that kind of stuff. I remember must have been Barry Island with my girlfriend at the time, and left my ID in my flat, and they wouldn't. I had to ring someone to walk to the gate to prove that I lived like in there. And I remember saying to them, I was like, I can literally see my room. I didn't, and it just got to the point, and I think that they put the first years in uni then, because they knew that COVID was going to spread, but they knew that we were almost all fit and healthy enough to kind of fight it off. So we were almost like a crash test dummy kind of thing. And I don't think it was right, but I think you kind of just make do. Like we didn't know any different. Obviously I was robbed of a first year uni experience, but I think we were very good at making do with what we had.
Starting university during lockdown proved an incredibly difficult experience. The traditional frameworks and structures in place that you'd have to meet people, to meet friends, just had completely disappeared. It was a case of seeing people maybe out shopping, Sainsbury's or wherever, that I might have known from my course, or seeing them on the stairwell, just having a brief conversation. There weren't the opportunities to meet at lectures, and even freshers speak didn't really occur. So it just felt very like a deflated balloon. There was so much potential for it to become something that would reach new heights, but obviously those expectations didn't quite turn out the way I had hoped.
And was it weird then going? So obviously you had that very intimate setup with your family. So then to go back to be with other people, was it a bit difficult to adapt back to being with other people, or was it quite a relief to sort of see your friends and everything?
Yeah, definitely a relief to see my friends. I think it was difficult to kind of adapt, being around other people, especially because in the first year of uni, you have to sign for a house with people that you don't necessarily know very well. So you have to decide the house you're going to live in. Well, you guys know this, by like kind of November, December time. And I signed for a house with 3 other girls who I really liked, like got along with them, and they're still some of my best friends now. But obviously you don't know each other that well. And then you don't even have then necessarily the rest of the school year to like still get to know them. So we kept in touch over FaceTime and stuff, and then met up in York maybe like the week before uni started and that kind of thing. But then, yeah, you're just going kind of straight from you haven't seen someone in 6 months. You didn't know them very well before. You haven't seen them for 6 months, and now you're living with them like full time, you know? So it's a bit of a, I was very lucky. I took my gamble paid off and I chose some good people to live with. But yeah, that was an interesting situation, definitely.
What was the academic experience like? Were we able to go into lectures? Was it online? How did that work?
So my first year was like from September to about November. There was like blended learning. So I remember for Spanish, we would have one class in person, one class online. For your in-person classes, you had to wear a mask and a visor to cover this part of your face, which I didn't fully understand the visor, but that's okay. So we would all wear those. Some people didn't wear the visors, but I think it was really scary for lecturers, and you could see they were really on edge the second like this flood of students come into the classroom. And for lecture halls, they would have like seats marked out. So you'd have one seat you could sit in, seat marked out. One seat you could sit in, seat marked out, so that you weren't sat directly next to each other. But that also didn't account like the hallways or anything like that. They tried to input sort of one-way systems, but nobody really stuck to that. So yeah, we started with in-person. I missed the first 2 weeks of in-person classes because I was isolating with my flat because of COVID. I think it was just really, really scary almost. So it kind of felt like when you were in the class, some lecturers chose to take their mask off if they were stood at the very front and were like a distance away from you. I think it was just strange not being able to see any of my peers' faces or not being able to see my lecturer's face. And then in November, I think it was November 1st, there was like a 1 month lockdown. I'm not sure whether that spread across the whole of
Oh yeah, the fire break thing.
Yeah. So that was the point where everything went online, and it stayed online until the end of my first year. Everyone knew it was coming. So on Halloween, October the 31st, Bristol was crazy.
Good.
Because they were this is our last night, we're going out, and people went out to the extreme. And three of my other flatmates and I went for like a little sit down meal just in case we didn't get to see each other. But people were really, really going out. They're like, we need to make the most of it before we're locked in tomorrow.
I'm sure there was a big spike as well after that.
Probably.
Yeah, and I understand the frustration, and we might not ever do this again, sort of thing. And I suppose it was a difficult thing to manage from a government perspective, or in the university's case, yeah. But looking back at it now, it's a whole series of very disastrous decisions that we make.
I think the second lockdown was a lot harder. Exams didn't get cancelled until quite late. And there was a lot of uncertainty around grades, and these grades were a bit more important because these are the ones that would have been going to universities as our predicted grades. So there was definitely a bit more pressure, I think also because it was winter and people had already had 6 months of it, and it had been a completely new experience for all of us. The first time I think we were all just sick of it, and I think it was a lot harder to kind of engage with people and keep those relationships going. Yeah, it was definitely a lot harder the second time around.
I don't think I had a bad first year, but I think it was just little things like societies. Like when I went into second year, I didn't even really know where the student union was. I didn't know where the library was. I felt like I'd already done a year in my uni, but when I moved into Gaze, that was my first year. So I think it's quite a difficult scenario. I don't know if obviously similar to what Izzy said, but the difference was we had to do all our exams, so we had all our essays like normal. And I remember, like in my first year, I was probably averaging 45. Like if I got a 50, I was over the moon because you just didn't know anything. I must have probably in reality only gone to 5 lectures because they were all online, and then your Wi-Fi would drop out or their Wi-Fi would drop out, and it just got to the point where it's like there's no point. So it was, so I think, I don't know about being reimbursed or anything. I've never really thought about it.
And obviously you'd had that massive gap between, you finish school in March, and then there was no like catch up or anything like that.
No, nothing. No, we were expected to almost like the essays we were producing was the same as the first years was supposed to be. If they'd have lectures, seminars, like tutor time, and all that kind of stuff. I didn't know anything. And it was looking back, it was insane. But when you're 18 and you don't know any different, you just don't really know any different.
How did your second year experience compare to your first, Izzy?
Well, I think what's probably interesting compared to Will's experience is that we obviously knew what it was like to be a student, a normal uni student. So we kind of had a taste of it, and then it's taken away, and then we're given back to uni with like all these new rules. And I think similarly to Will, one thing that I really, really missed was like the societies and the sports, because it's a massive part of making friends as well, which is probably one of the hardest things to do while you move away. And like I remember like in second year, couldn't play squash inside, could only train like netball, football, things like that outside. And then that meant that over the winter, things were constantly being called off and there was no consistency. Because in my third year, we trained netball inside and like play squash and everything. Third year is typically harder in terms of content and testing and things like that. But I genuinely think I did better in my third year because I think my life was better. I think my social life, my mental health, like everything like that, I felt way more comfortable there. Even the most silly things like the ability to use the library, because I don't work very well at home. And I know probably Will found this as well. I think in uni, your bedroom is your room. So your desk is in there, your bed is in there. And I find it really hard to separate those things.
Yeah, same. Yeah, exactly with me.
And I can't imagine, because I had a pretty big room with a double bed. Well, I can't imagine what that would have been like in my first year room, to be honest. I think
I could use my wingspan. I would touch both sides of my room.
Yeah, literally. And yeah, I remember like I think the reason why I achieved so much in my third year is because just generally I was happier. And it's not that I like particularly struggled with anything while I was in second year, but I think it's the being able to look back and compare is the big driver for me. But yeah, I think it's the societies, it's the silly things like walking to and from uni. You would bump into so many different people. To be honest, online stuff is so easy to get away with not doing the work. Like I did it myself. Like it's so unmotivating. And like I remember in second year, I had this English module, and there was only 6 of us in this seminar anyway, and we had to read a book a week, and then we would discuss the book in the seminar, which is quite an intensive workload. But the idea with the English is that there's like low contact hours and then you do the work outside of that. And it was led by the American PhD student who was this young guy. And the first week we all turned up and I was the only one who'd read the book and I was the only one who had anything to say. With other people were like, my Wi-Fi is bad. Sorry, my Wi-Fi dropped. Like, they'd get asked a question, their camera would be off, and then they'd come back and they say, oh, sorry, I missed that question, I was just in the toilet. Do you know what I mean? It was like much easier to do online than it is in person, and much easier to call in sick. You know, you don't have that like face-to-face accountability. And I probably wouldn't have done nowhere near as much work for that seminar as I did, except for the fact that I felt so sorry for that guy, the PhD student. And he told us it was his first module. He was teaching as well. I would like be forcing myself to finish that book every week because I had to give this guy something to talk about. Yeah. I felt so bad for him.
That's an interesting point, to be fair, because everyone forgets as well that for the uni lecturers and all that, it was their first time doing all this online stuff. And I remember everyone would just lie in bed, cameras off.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And to be fair, I remember the lecturers would always have their camera on, and it must have been like speaking into like a black hole because no one had any interest. No one did the work. Like as you were saying, it must have been quite, everyone speaks about the students, but the lecturers, it mustn't have been easy for either.
You know, were there any sort of standout moments? Was there any moments of frustration or joy as sort of things reopened more, as society sort of opened up a bit more?
Yeah, I think frustration, I think I was very frustrated at like the sort of zigzagging of restrictions and lockdowns. Because to me as a student and to me it was such a change to go from staying at home to protect my mum to, everything's a free-for-all when students are only thinking of themselves. So that was, for me, quite frustrating, because I was thinking, well, you've just gone out and now you're going home for Christmas. So that's those sort of things would worry me. I know in the week leading up to Christmas, like, I didn't do anything because I knew my parents were coming to get me. I was going home back to my normal routine of like staying inside. I think joy, like, you find joy in the small moments, like whether it's going for a coffee with a friend. For me, I just started seeing my now boyfriend, like it was like the small happy moments. Like we'd meet outside, go to Costa, get a gingerbread latte to walk to the same class that we had, because that was pretty much all you were allowed to do. But like we go for like nice walks in Bristol in nature. So you find like joy in those little small moments. But yeah, overall, it was just largely frustrating.
That's interesting, actually. Yeah, meeting someone in the pandemic. I suppose it takes it a bit. It's a bit slower then, I guess. It's a bit slower, but
it's also a bit strange because you meet somebody without ever seeing their face. I met my boyfriend in a lecture, and we were like doing the typical like awkward chat you do with the people you first meet outside a lecture hall, waiting to go in with mask and visor, and then you like leave the classroom and you go home, because that's what you do in COVID times. And then you're texting, but you're thinking, I don't know what this person looks like, but we're getting along really well over text. And then you go for like your first coffee walk and you're like, okay, I know what you look like now. But yeah, it's definitely slower because there are just things that you can't do. Like you can't visit each other's flats and stuff. That's not allowed.
did you ever feel like you had sort of a real university experience in the idea of what you thought university would be like what they'd said in the brochure and whatnot? And did you ever have that at any point, do you think?
I don't think so. I really don't think so. I went clubbing once in 4 years, and that was, I think, at the end of my second year when things were like fully open and it was if nothing had ever happened. Not really, but that's how they were making out to be. So yeah, in those 4 years, I didn't go clubbing. The freshers' fair, like, you had to be distanced. I think I was just so scared of getting COVID, even when you could enjoy things. Like, I was just really anxious, and I feel like at that point people were starting to become aware of like long-term effects of COVID, or people living with long COVID, and I was like really afraid of those sorts of things, or like not knowing how it would affect you in the future.
When we went back to school, I actually got long COVID in February 2022, so about a year nearly after we gone back to school, and I became quite sick quite fast. I pushed myself and ended up completing my A-levels, got really good grades, and was lucky enough to get my place in Queen's University to do social work, but unfortunately I wasn't well enough to go, so that was quite hard for me. But I was doing little courses, little bits and pieces in terms of work, but I was pushing myself too much, even after deciding to take a gap year, and I just progressively got more and more sick. I had to stop everything, and I then started to doing volunteering and working on my health. I started university in September 2023, and I unfortunately managed to do it for 3 weeks and then got reinfected with COVID again, which made me even more unwell. So that was really difficult to manage. I think also after the pandemic being quote unquote over, it was just weird to kind of have this virus that has really changed my life and has really affected me. It has gone back to normal for a lot of people, but it hasn't necessarily gone back to normal for me. I was really into my sport, really active young person, really extroverted and outgoing, and I'm not able to do what I intended to do. I haven't been at uni. A lot of my friends are graduating this year and I haven't been able to complete 1 year yet. I haven't really started, so that's been really challenging, and a lot of like my freedoms and stuff, they didn't happen. I didn't get work experience. I haven't learned how to drive. My social life has changed a lot, and I'm not able to sport anymore, which has been really hard. But the good moments have been getting involved in youth social action and volunteering. I've worked with over 60 different organisations and charities. I've also been published in a few different things, and I've also hosted my own podcast now on Be the Change. So these are definitely the good things that have happened. I've also made some really great, amazing new friends.
In terms of like being what I'm referring to as sort of generation COVID, so like being part of a cohort that had this experience, did it teach you anything about resilience and, you know, your perspective of the world around you going through that time?
Yeah, I think it probably did. I think it definitely teaches you to appreciate like the little things. So like instead of that, you had all this freedom, and then it's all been taken away again, or it's all been taken away for the first time ever, and you're just left on your own. And I think it probably teaches you to kind of, or especially to me, just be comfortable. You've got to be comfortable on your own and comfortable in your own skin, because there was, especially in that first year of uni, like you were on your own. Luckily, I found a really good group of mates very quickly, that I'm sure there were people who didn't, and maybe even dropped out of uni on the back of it, which isn't right at all. But I think it does teach you to appreciate like the little things in life, the everyday things, and also be comfortable in your own skin, because as our generation, we probably had to spend a lot more time on our own than previous generations did.
I think similarly to Will, they appreciate the little things. Like every time we'd come out of lockdown and I could just sit in a beer garden with a pint, that just felt insanely good. Yeah. And even now, like sometimes I will like go for a walk and then kind of catch myself and be like, but there was a time where this was illegal. But I also think in a certain way, you kind of create your own fun. Me and my housemates, and I was really lucky because, like I said, I'm still really good friends with them now. And honestly, we kind of joked that like we got so comfortable around each other throughout the lockdowns. We were like a little family, but also like we would like burp and fart freely in the house. And then when we were released back into society, we had to like relearn societal norms because like anything went in our house. And like we would literally like sit down at like 9 o'clock in the morning with a cup of tea and just like have the most like obscene conversation. And like you kind of forget that that's like just not like normal life. So that was quite an interesting thing, I think. But yeah, I think we just learned to make our own fun. We just learned to make the mundane things a bit more exciting, like just playing music while cooking and doing the dishes and having karaoke nights and just trying to have that uni experience while also kind of like respecting the fact that there's a global pandemic on. So appreciating the little things is a big one. Learning to make your own fun. Yeah, I think those, and resilience. I mean, I told you about that experience I had with my overall grade, and I think that really taught me a lot of stuff about resilience, and also just like sometimes things don't happen for you, and that's okay. Like you don't need to beat yourself up. You just need to try harder. Well, not try harder next time, but just give your all next time again. And then that's fine. That's kind of what I learned.
Being part of Generation COVID has taught me just to slow down and be grateful for the things in life, even just the little things, because everything can be so quickly taken away from you. And it's just important to be grateful for the things in life that make you smile and make you laugh, and just take each day as it comes, and just try not to put so much pressure on yourself, because I feel like we often do that and take things for granted.
I think being part of Generation COVID has taught me a lot about resilience, in the sense of being able to embrace new opportunities, just being able to keep going even when it all seems like it's too tricky, particularly managing essays, managing a new writing style, managing the demands and expectations that university comes with. So from an academic perspective, being able to do that without really seeing anyone, having a social outlet, really taught me about the value of I'm the only person that can help myself, and I really need to push myself and make sure that if I want to achieve something, I put in the necessary work and the necessary steps to actually get there. So I guess it maybe more than anything, just taking ownership of my own learning and realising that we're not at school anymore and that no one's really going to come and save me. I need to save myself.
Looking back, would you identify yourself as sort of being part of Generation COVID? As in, you know, do you feel like your classmates at school and at that first year of university, do you think it's an experience that, do you feel like you were part of something that perhaps hasn't really been talked about that much?
Yeah, I think so. I think, yeah, I would definitely describe us as having that sort of like shared identity. I'm not sure whether it's like trauma bonding or whether it's just something that everyone feels. So yeah, I felt like apart from the sort of grade scandals that were coming out on results day, felt like nobody was really talking about what this would now look like for us and how our university experiences would then look, because we were starting university having had no kind of academic content or academic settings since March. So for many people, they hadn't even finished their courses. Like your A-level course hadn't even finished, and yet you were jumping into a university course, missing a lot of the fundamentals. So I felt like I was almost starting university without those fundamentals that I would have revised for, and I would have been really confident with come June. But in March, when you have so many other things going on, yeah, it sort of felt like I was missing some fundamentals, which I don't think is talked about that much.
Because a big part of leaving school is that, leavers days, everyone's shining their shirts, ironing their shirts. Were you able to have that experience in any way, or not?
No, I remember at that point I was so excited because they were talking about, like, the teachers were talking about booking the venue for our leavers valedictorian. So we were going to have it in the Radisson Blu Hotel in Cardiff, and everyone was thinking. I know one girl bought her dress. There were no tickets or anything though, so I'm not actually sure which did that. But yeah, one of my friends bought her dress. I remember being really excited about that, and then I thought, oh, we won't get to have that. So my school alternatively did these hoodies that you could have made, your name and the colour that you want. So I've got, I think mine's grey or burgundy. I just got my name on the back. And there was a day I can't remember when it was, but there was a day when one teacher was at the school with all of these hoodies, and you could go and collect your hoodie. So there's funny, and my teacher got all of these photos of people stood with their hoodies, and she made them into a goodbye video, and she asked people to send in photos. So that's on YouTube somewhere. I watched it recently and I was like, oh, that's embarrassing. But no, it was that was the only thing you could do. So it's a really sweet moment and a nice initiative for this teacher to take. But yeah, that was the only form of goodbye or end of celebration that we really got.
That makes me really sad thinking about all the many thousands of young people that didn't get that.
Yeah, you just said goodbye one day and then you went home.
Yeah, because it's sort of the end of your childhood. I know you're an adult when you're 18, but I don't know, there's something that really lingers inside of me where I go, I don't know what I would have been able to do without saying goodbye to my friends at school. I just something about it.
Yeah, I think it was really sad to not have that final moment, because even that, I think it was Friday, March 20th or something, even though at that point, or in the back of your head something's niggling, I'm never going to see these people again, you don't have that nice moment where it's a really final goodbye. You just all walk out of the school gates together and you turn to walk your own way.
And if you could go back to that time when you were just about to enter lockdown, is there any advice you'd give to your younger self?
A good question. That's a very good question.
I think I would just say it will end. Don't worry. There will be an end, because I think there were points where we were in and out of lockdowns for 2 years. I also, like I said about my great aunt being quite vulnerable, I worried about her a lot, and I put a lot of stress on myself, I think. So I would just kind of say she'll make it through, you'll be all right, don't stress yourself out, because I would not disinfect a bag of peas when they came from the shop delivery, and I would beat myself up about it. There's always things coming up on the news about this makes you vulnerable, and it would just make us more scared, and I think that would have saved my whole family and me a lot of stress.
Yeah, and to be fair, just to echo that, to be honest, I think just it will end, and just keep plodding along. Things do get better, and I think that's probably you can take that analogy and put it into any part of your life. You could be going through something really difficult, but everything does end. It won't be forever. It could take 2 years, it could take 2 weeks, but there's always an end date on everything. So yeah. I think just that good old British analogy, isn't it? Just keep plodding along.
Yeah.
And things will get better.
That's what I was thinking about, all this most recent stuff with all these conflicts that are going on. I was thinking, well, we've always been told that what the moment that you're living through is the worst moment ever. And then I remember my friends telling me, I can't remember what year it was, very far back. And basically there was a big volcanic eruption and a big chunk of the earth was covered. And so crops failed. And basically it's the worst year ever because nothing could grow. And she said that to me and I was like, that is bad, actually. It can get worse, but this is not as bad as it could be. So, yeah, it sort of weirdly gave me a bit of perspective. And I was like, oh.
I also find it quite like reassuring to think that like the things that happened to me during the pandemic have led me to be where I am now. And they're going to lead me to be where I am going in the future. And that, you know, I don't want to be like everything happens for a reason because it's such a cliche. Like things will happen in a certain order, in a certain way. Maybe a perspective where we had to go through it to come out the other end.
If you could go back to Emily who entered lockdown or just before lockdown, is there any advice you'd give your younger self?
Advice I'd give my younger self. As in, like, the Emily who's in lockdown, give advice to her.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd say to her that maybe to make her feel less anxious or...
I think, when I was at home, I wasn't feeling so anxious. I think the only thing I would say to her is like have a bit more confidence going into your final year. Like it doesn't so much matter that you've missed like 4 months of school. It's fine. You'll be fine. So yeah, I think maybe let her know. Maybe let her know that she should actually pick up some Spanish books. She should pick up some Spanish revision because when she gets to university and it's a massive step up and your classes are completely in Spanish, you probably should have prepared a little bit more for that. I remember like I bought a little like A2 Spanish book from Amazon, and I was every day I'd be like, I'll do this later, I'll do a bit of this. I never did. And I think finding some sort of resources to better prepare you for university when there's nothing going on, that would be the advice I would give to her.
COVID-19 has cast a long shadow over our lives, over our communities and wider society. Very little time has been given to young people and talking about how disrupted the pandemic has been to their education. The consequences of missed school, missed opportunities and subpar university experiences will stay and shape this generation for years to come. I'm grateful for the conversations with Will, Izzy and Emily, and the voice notes from Eden and Emma. I really appreciate them sharing their experiences for this episode. In the show notes, you'll find links to previous episodes of the pod where I share the stories of those impacted by long COVID and the support we should be giving them. The title track for this show is Young Shall Grow, credit and thanks to Afro Cluster, Magugu and Asha Jane. Whilst editing this episode and hearing these accounts, I thought back to those early years and weeks of the pandemic. As we slowed down and stayed at home, so many of us turned to the BBC, to streaming content and listening to the radio for comfort. I remember hearing the Welsh musician and poet Max Boyce reading a poem he'd written in those early weeks, and I wanted to close out this episode by reading it. When Just the Tide Went Out by Max Boyce. Last night as I lay sleeping, when dreams came fast to me, I dreamt I saw Jerusalem beside a tideless sea. And one dream I'll remember as the stars began to fall was Banksy painting Alan Wynne on my neighbour's garage wall. And dreams like that sustain me till these darkest times have passed and chase away the shadow no caring night should cast. But times like this can shine a light, as hardship often can, to see the best in people and the good there is in man. And I remember Swansea with nobody about. The shops were closed like Sunday, and just the tide went out. And I remember Mumbles with the harbour in its keep, and the fishing boats at anchor that trawl the waters deep. And I heard the seabirds calling, as the gulls all wheeled about. But all the town was sleeping now, and just the tide went out. And when these days are over, and memories remain, when children painted rainbows and the sun shone through the rain, and the doctors and the nurses who stretched with all the pain, and I hope the carers never see a time like this again, And I prayed last week for Boris, who knocked on heaven's door, and I thought of voting Tory, which I'd never done before. And though the sun is shining, I have no immediate plans. So I'll write a book on staying in and ways to wash your hands. And now more days of lockdown, 3 weeks of staying in. I'm running out of vodka, and I've started on the gin. And my neighbours are complaining I've heard them scream and shout with the sound the bins are making when I take the empties out. And when all this is over and our fragile world survives, I hope that God is caring now for the ones who gave their lives. And I'll pray we'll find an answer, for my faith is cast in doubt, and God draws back the heavens and all the stars came out. And I'll remember mornings with nobody about, when the shops were closed like Sunday, and just the tide went out. This episode was researched, written and edited by me, Tom Spare, with additional editing by Emily Merry. Spare a Thought is a Be the Change Media Network production. Thank you for listening.